Early morning. The breeze blew over the leaves, rustling. The morning sun was warm, falling on Wu Mian's face, reflecting the red cocky windbreaker. Has reached the beginning of summer, but he is wearing a trench coat, a pair of black lambskin gloves, and a pair of untimely sunglasses. The medical department of Yajing Township Hospital has a long bow, slightly humble. He didn't want to clash with this airborne successor next to him. He had already seen through the world, he just wanted to retire smoothly. For him in life, it is better to hold his grandson earlier than to be the dean. But the cold one in front of him, along the way, only Section Chief Duan was talking, but the young man said nothing. The silence made the sunglasses become more meaningful, and even some other kind of pressure. Section Chief Duan was slanderous, who would come back if he was able to go abroad these years. How good abroad, especially doctors. The income is high, and the work is not very busy. It is really incomparable in China. It seems that the old Wu family has gone abroad for gilding these years, and they are still aluminum alloy. After coming back, he couldn't stand firm in the imperial capital, so he could only go back to his hometown and install a large clove of garlic. But how the old Wu's kid has nothing to do with Section Chief Duan, he didn't have this young returnee. It's said that he still has the idea of a doctor or teaching how to fight. Thinking of the person behind Wu Mian, he became more careful. Xiao Wu, just a turn ahead is the emergency department and inpatient department of our hospital. Section Chief Duan introduced. Wu Mian nodded. Your mother brought you on duty when you were young, and you couldn't play with that kid in my house. I want to say. I was 7 years old that year. Section Chief Duan, you bought 2 Hylar ice bricks, one package is a bit torn in the lower right corner, you blocked it with your hand, and gave it to your son. Wu Mian said flatly. Section Chief Duan staggered slightly. What happened 22 years ago, I can only remember a rough outline, which is all with a good memory. After all, Lao Wu's current position, being able to interact with the Wu family is finally a bit of an old feeling. But how can Wu Mian remember so clearly? For an instant, Section Chief Duan felt a bit cold in his back. He immediately stabilized his emotions and changed the subject. Usually, there are not many patients in our hospital. They are all folks from the village. They come with some anti-inflammatory drugs. Isn't this the introduction of several universities in the city 2 years ago? The university city is right next to it. Sometimes students come to see minor injuries. The hospital is a little more lively. It is said that it is a second-class hospital, but in fact, we are not qualified at all, and many second-class operations cannot be performed. I don't blame us for not being self-motivated. The county hospital is 10 miles away. The hospital in the city is not far away, and the affiliated hospital of the medical university is even closer than the city hospital. If you have some money, you can go to the county hospital or go to the city or the province. No one is here to see a doctor. Wu Mian nodded and said, it's okay if you are not busy. The sound is clean and transparent, like the rising sun in the shade of a tree, but a little bit cold, not like it is now, but the rising sun in winter, the coldness is indelible. He heard what was wrong in Section Chief Duan's words. He has a good memory and other people's strange look. He has been used to it for so many years. On a Friday 22 years ago, the sound of the wind, the smell of the disinfectant water in the hospital, and the milk scent of ice bricks appeared directly in Wu Mian's mind without recollection. Thinking of these, Wu Mian felt a little headache, very slight. The hospital in the countryside does not have as many people as the imperial capital and the magic capital hospital. The morning is quiet, and the birds are singing in the forest. It looks like a peaceful year. The two were walking along the boulevard, and Section Chief Duan introduced Wu Mian to Wu Mian the glorious history and current structure of the Bajing Township Hospital. We just saw the outpatient clinic by the road, and it hasn't opened yet. This is the old family building. I don't know if you remember it. It's all family members of our hospital. They are all moving now. Let's rent out here. Don't do anything messy. Below is the laboratory and pathology department. Here, the outside of the house with the sign of the security department is the security department, and the inside is the Chinese medicine acupuncture and moxibustion department. Wu Mian listened to Section Chief Duan's introduction, feeling deeply moved. In my memory, the Beijing's Hospital of Traditional Chinese Medicine was like this 22 years ago. I didn't expect that after many days, there would be no change at all. The clinical laboratory is located under the residential building, and the acupuncture and moxibustion department is together with the security department. This kind of combination is rare now. The red brick wall in my memory has been polished by the years, and the color has been dimmed a lot. The emerald green vines on it are thicker and more lush, vigorous, and dancing gently in the face of the rising sun. The new building is under construction. It is said that we will move again in 1 year. Section Chief Duan continued, I told us about the new building a few years ago, but it was snatched away by the county hospital. Looking at the building, I wanted to. It's impossible not to be greedy. I don't have any hope in my life. I just hope I can have my own office before I retire, and I'll be content with drinking tea and reading the newspaper every day. There is an office now, but the bathroom is the opposite door, and it smells like tea. Was talking, suddenly there was a noise from the emergency department. Chief Duan, it's busy here early in the morning, and it doesn't seem to be very leisurely. Wu Mian frowned slightly, and her eyelashes under her black sunglasses blinked slightly. Section Chief Duan smiled, Xiao Wu, just call me Uncle Duan as before. We are not as formal as your big hospital. I said it's a section chief, but in fact it's not even at the unit level. Department of Medical Affairs, Science and Education, the medical record room is all together with all these miscellaneous departments. There are only 4 people in total, and there is one who has always been on the sick number. He said, glancing at Wu Mian from the corner of his eye, there was something in the words. It's just the deep meaning, he didn't expect a little boy under 30 to understand it. Why is it so messy? Wu Mian did not answer Section Chief Duan's words, his ears moved slightly, and then frowned, and asked softly. There was a mess of noises in the direction of the emergency department, and the quiet wind in the morning seemed to become restless. Section Chief Duan saw Wu Mian's serious expression, he was happy, and smiled, don't think about it so much. If you are in emergency, it is rarely sent to our hospital. The technical force is here, and it is difficult to live when it comes. It's better to go to the hospital in the city, which is only half an hour's drive away. No matter how urgent it is, the county hospital is better than ours. Wu Mian nodded, his brows stretched out, and he answered. Talking, turning the corner, Wu Mian's footsteps stopped. In front of the gate of the emergency department, a middle-aged man in his 40s with a shaggy beard dressed in a white suit with a pair of black body hair exposed outside, looking very serious. Holding a peachwood sword in his hand, he muttered and said, in and out of the 3 realms, the Tao is the only one. The body is golden light, reflecting my body. Wu Mian was startled, then looked sideways at Section Chief Duan. Section Chief Duan has no desires, but the most basic face is still needed. Anyway, this is all a hospital. Not the Taoist temple on Laya Mountain. Wearing white clothes, it is not good to perform folklore performances in the morning. An old face was reddening, Section Chief Duan really didn't look any further. Wanted to explain something, but when he talked, he felt choked up. The Taoist Golden Light Mantra is considered professional and personal talent. Wu Mian didn't care, his eyelashes twitched behind sunglasses, his eyes opened, and he looked at the distant crowd and the folkloric master with interest. Although there is no reproach or contempt in this remark, it makes Section Chief Duan feel more uncomfortable than just a few words of curse. Bajing Township Hospital is said to be a second-class hospital, but the section chief knows what his hospital can and cannot do. Appendicitis is a necessary item, and it is also the main item of surgery. Resection of the gallbladder is the largest operation in the township hospital, and only Director Wang can perform it. Although surgery is weak, internal medicine is okay. Colds, fevers, and intravenous drips are much better than local clinics. No matter how they are all serious hospitals. Folk customs can be regarded as talents? Section Chief Duan's impression of Wu Mian was a bit bad. This kid was damaging enough to bury people, he didn't even have a dirty word, but he made himself extremely heartwarming. If you open one eye and close one eye as usual, the section chief of folklore and folklore won't bother to care about it, and it will pass. But in front of Wu Mian's face, Section Chief Duan's face was really a bit unbearable. He was mainly afraid that Wu Mian would go home and say something. Xiao Wu didn't care, but if old Wu felt wrong, he might have to eat and hang up. Section Chief Duan coughed, frowned, and walked a few steps quickly, and scolded, "Wei Dabao, what are you doing?" Dr. Wei Dabao Ei, who was wearing a white suit and holding a peachwood sword in his hand, chanted with all his attention. The wooden sword in his hand is blowing wind. If it weren't for a pair of shaggy legs and dirty white clothes, putting on a Taoist robe, it would really be a bit of a fairy style. Wei Dabao. Section Chief Duan raised his volume, a bit of anger was already in his speech. "Throw out the dirty things for the child, don't make trouble." A woman in her 30s who was next to her yelled angrily before the Section Chief Duan had a seizure. Section Chief Duan had no aura, and the whole person was directly persuaded. The old ladies in the village can't provoke them. They really scratched their faces when they came across a fierce splash, and they couldn't even go home. "Go away! Don't disturb Master Wei!" Another man glared at Section Chief Duan and said fiercely. The sound is not loud, not because he is giving face to Section Chief Duan. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com is more likely that he is worried that it will disturb Master Wei's practice. Section Chief Duan was not angry either, but sighed in his heart. It seemed that this was a fellow from the village who came specifically to look for Wei Dabao. He was clear about the matter in the middle. If Wu Mian didn't follow, Section Chief Duan would just pretend that he hadn't seen it. The township hospitals are different from the hospitals in the city, and even the county hospitals in H County are different. You can never look at it with normal eyes. Medical disputes generally only occur in cities. A small hospital like Bajing Township Traditional Chinese Medicine Hospital cannot pay much for breaking the bones. The people who usually come to see the doctor are all villagers. Everyone knows what to see and what to see. But this is also a good thing. Don't worry about medical disputes. The medical department's life is basically nothing, just eat and wait for death. As for things like medical quality and safe operation, the section chief doesn't think it has anything to do with him, it doesn't matter. If you are willing to engage in folklore, you can engage in folklore. One is willing to fight, the other is willing to suffer. But today is different from the past, Xiao Wu followed by his side. If you go back and tell Lao Wu, the Chinese medicine hospital is doing a lot of feudal superstition. This cauldron can't be remembered by itself, I'm afraid that Dean Zhou won't be able to recite it. Section Chief Duan had difficulty facing Dr. Wei who was doing folklore activities, his face was so ugly and ugly. The doctor is really not that good. Here, there is a thunderbolt in the next line of thunder murmuring, your gestures are a bit inaccurate, your wrists should be up, the arc drawn by the sword tip will be rounded. When Section Chief Duan was embarrassed, he heard from his ear Wu Mian's voice. Section Chief Duan almost spewed a mouthful of old blood. Wu Mian, graduated from a prestigious school, and it is said that a doctor of medicine who has also studied at the same time even discussed the details of folk customs with Dr. Wei. Is there anything more unreliable than this? Wei Dabao, who was chanting the golden light mantra, heard Wu Mian say so, stopped the peachwood sword in his hand, and looked at the speaker in surprise. The tone of the person who had just spoken was flat and cold, but Wei Dabao heard it in his ears, and it was no less than thunder on the ground. He was very familiar with the way that person said, but it was all the time when Master said that he didn't need to work in the early years. He never expected that there are superiors in the Beijing's township hospital of traditional Chinese medicine. It's just that when he glanced at it, he didn't see the imaginary appearance of a worldly expert, but he was a young man wearing sunglasses, a cocky windbreaker, and black gloves. Although it looks a little weird, the young man's complexion is gentle, like the big boy next door, so he doesn't look like a worldly expert. Wei Dabao was stunned. What's the situation? Who is your master? Just now your actions are basically correct, but some details are questionable. Who is sick? What is going on? Wu Mian asked indifferently. Wei Dabao hesitated, and said, a kid who often ghosts in bed commits a crime several times a year. People wake up but can't move. It's okay, just come to me to drive away evil spirits. Ghost press generally refers to a situation where you suddenly feel conscious while sleeping, but your body cannot move. There is a formal scientific name in medicine, sleep paralysis. This little comrade, what you said just now is true. Wei Dabao asked politely. If you can say the name Golden Light Curse, you should be a fellow in the same way. Although Wei Dabao was a bit disdainful when facing Section Chief Duan, he didn't even bother to say a word. But he didn't want to offend the young man in front of him easily, so he asked politely. That's it. Wu Mian stretched out her hand and took the Daomu sword. Wei Dabao was taken aback, and he didn't pay attention, and the peachwood sword in his hand fell into the young man's hand. What just happened? There is a thunderbolt inside. When I say this sentence, my wrist is upturned by 27 degrees. When turning the thunder god, you must draw an arc with the inner right elbow as the center, and press your wrist down to 12°. As he said, Wu Mian made an action by the way, which seemed simple, but Wei Dabao understood the difficulty. After only one glance, he was sure that the young man in front of him was countless times deeper than himself. At least they are more proficient in their movements than they are. At first glance, they can be seen as Tongzigong. After so many years of training, I don't know who the seniors are. Brother, dare to ask. After listening to Wu Mian, the title in Wei Dabao's words has changed. Dr. Wei, where is the patient? The two said at the same time. Wei Dabao paused, puzzled. The young man in front of him is clearly an outsider. Why do you ask the patient? The thoughts flashed, and Wei Dabao knew it. This is the way of entering the world. It seems that the handsome young man in front of him is a bit more powerful than he thought. Thinking about it, his expression and demeanor were more respectful. He bent slightly, and said, Brother, the patient is in the room. I was worried that evil wind would enter the body, so I didn't let him come out. Section Chief Duan was dumbfounded when they heard the conversation between the two. What's the matter with this? How can Wei Dabao, who is usually rebellious, call Xiaowu a senior brother? And it doesn't look like an irony, his attitude towards Wu Mian is more respectful than that of himself, the Chief of Medical Affairs. Thinking of this, Section Chief Duan felt bitter. In rural hospitals, doctors don't know the rules. It's like a city hospital. No doctor dares to offend the medical department. What kind of department is the medical department? It's like a Jinyue. Section Chief Duan was in a mess in his mind. There is still no sense of existence. Section Chief Duan is distracted, feeling sigh in his heart. How many times do you commit a crime every year? Didn't you go to the city to see it? Wu Mian asked as he walked into the house. The patient's family members stared with small eyes and intentionally blocked it. It can be seen that Wei Dabao's expression and tone of voice felt a little wrong. Even the man and woman who had been irritated by Section Chief Duan looked at him silently. Baby, the patient is 12 years old this year. The disease is not very serious. Only a few times when he wakes up and can't move, he asks me for treatment. Isn't it enough to suppress the bed? Completely disperse. Wei Dabao whispered. While he was talking, he looked sideways at Wu Mian. Entered the room, Wu Mian still wore the pair of sunglasses. Wei Dabao thought to himself that although this senior was young, he was really different. Just, wearing sunglasses, what can you see in the room? Nurse. Wei Dabao's brain was not enough. In his expectation, this brother would definitely start the consultation and examination from the doctor's point of view. What he was curious about was how to solve the problem. But from the doctor's point of view, just call the nurse when you enter, which is not right. What did you shout in the morning? You can't see the words, such a big silence? Didn't graduate from elementary school? Are you illiterate? A nurse walked out of the duty room with breathless eyes, her eyes were sleepy, her mouth was covered, and her face was getting up. Section Chief Duan sighed, but now the little nurses are not easy to mess with. The money from the hospital was low, and the little girl who was more active had already left. Not to mention anything else, go to various short video sites to record bounce videos, and the reward is more than the salary. Some of the things that remain are the problems of one's own level, and more of the opinions of the family. Usually they are gunpowder, and they can shoot at one point. If Xiao Wu is stunned, how can he make a round without pretending to be himself? As soon as the thought came up, Section Chief Duan suddenly felt something was wrong. He was stunned to see that the little nurse who had just woke up suddenly changed into a different person, with a ladylike makeup, elegantly like a high-quality service star selected by the city every year. Are you a family member of the patient? May I ask what is the matter with you? The little nurse asked. Section Chief Duan was taken aback. Is this still an emergency nurse he is familiar with? On weekdays, a resignation report that is unsatisfactory is posted. When have I ever seen such a gentle and drizzle when I speak, and there is a sweet and greasy vigor in the words. Return you, yours, in places like Beijing's a township, who would use this honorific name? This is my own dream, right? The section chief of UU reading www.uuganshu.com is a little dazed. I'm a new colleague from the medical department of our hospital, please give the patient an ion, 3 items of A function. By the way, urgent investigation. Wu Mian said. Hearing Wu Mian's voice was clear, a blush flashed across the face of the little nurse. Xiao Wu, what are you doing to check these? Section Chief Duan didn't understand, he was afraid of this recklessness, and took out the attitude of checking everything in the Imperial City Hospital. Those who stay at home to see a doctor are poor people who can't get out. If I checked everything, the money was spent in vain, and the folks would have to be pierced in the backbone within a few days. What's more, someone will block the door and chase. Not afraid? Splash your yard's shit, just ask if you are afraid. The pediatric section chief has seen all these things. The section chief Duan, the patient has obvious hyperthyroidism, and it is considered that it is a sleep disorder caused by hyperthyroidism hypokalemic periodic paralysis. Wu Mian was expressionless, and section chief Duan said in a low voice. What the hell? Section chief Duan asked suspiciously. He knows hyperthyroidism, he knows hypokalemia, and he knows a little bit about sleep disorders. But together it turned into a sleep disorder caused by hyperthyroid hypokalemic periodic paralysis. These words together, the section chief was suddenly confused. Shouldn't be a lie, pretending to say a long list of nouns pretending to be profound, showing that he is very professional, this kind of personnel section chief sees a lot. Besides, no one has encountered the ghost press before. Even if I have never encountered it, I have heard of it. I have never eaten pork, I have always seen pigs run. I have never heard of hyperthyroidism or hypokalemia, wait. Hyperthyroidism? Section Chief Duan chuckled in his heart. The patient lying on the flat car did have bulging eyes, but it was not obvious. Section Chief Duan tried to keep his eyes open to observe the patient's condition, doing inspections that he was not good at. The eyes of the boy lying on the flat wagon seemed to be a bit convex, but this alone doesn't tell much. What's wrong with people's natural big eyes? Section Chief Duan thought subconsciously. As for the thyroid gland, Section Chief Duan almost cracked his eyeballs, barely able to see a little swelling. Can this diagnose hyperthyroidism? Just kidding. Young people are young people who don't have any sense of stability, Section Chief Duan muttered in his heart. Prepare a micro pump, and pump it in after the results are reported. Halfway through what Wu Mian said, the nurse said embarrassedly, well, there is no micro pump in our hospital. Wu Mianfu, from the time he went to the hospital for internships until he came back from the United States, he always used a micro pump for potassium. He didn't even need to think about how much he should pump, he could tell by opening his mouth. Has been integrated into the bones and become an instinct. But this is the Beijing's a hospital of traditional Chinese medicine. It doesn't even have a micro pump. If it is given by a peripheral vein, it is quite difficult to calculate. Potassium chloride stimulation of peripheral blood vessels, how many milliliters a drop of liquid is equivalent to, the type of infusion set, the concentration of potassium supplementation, the patient's physical condition, etc. all need to be taken into consideration. It's okay. Wu Mian said, wait a moment. Then what? I will teach you how to do it. After Wu Mian finished speaking, he turned to look at Wei Dabao, Dr. Wei Dabao, Wei. I am. Wei Dabao replied in a daze. Talk to your family, arrange to have an electrocardiogram for the child, and then come. Wu Mian glanced at Section Chief Duan. Xiao Wu, do you want a quieter place? Section Chief Duan asked. Although Wu Mian was wearing sunglasses and couldn't see his eyes, Section Chief Duan still accurately felt what he meant by himself. Wu Mian nodded. Duty room. Good. Section Chief Duan was a little worried. Is this going to kill the mighty stick? Xiao Chen was still young, so he didn't know that the intrigue in the primary hospitals was not less than that of the higher-level hospitals, and was even more complicated to some extent. The key point is that big cities are basically playing tricks and wearing small shoes. If you provoke someone in the primary hospital, you really dare to beat people. Don't say anything else, just talk about the Wei Dabao in front of him. Why did he open one eye and close the other and pretend not to see it? That's all for a reason. Wu Mian wants to take the posture of the chief of the medical department and scold Wei Dabao. Xiao Wu doesn't care if he can overturn the car, just don't drag him down. Section Chief Duan led Wu Mian to the duty room and saw Dr. Wei Dabao arranging for the patient to do the electrocardiogram. He flashed his mind and thought clearly about the stakes, and whispered, Xiao Wu, our primary hospital. Chairman Duan, you sit down. Wu Mian stood in the duty room, only glanced at the mess of bedding, and at first he was picked up to see that the patient had not had time to clean up. He stood by the window and said indifferently, you don't know until you read the electrocardiogram. Section Chief Duan frowned, thinking that you still know you need to read the ECG to know? He wasn't as reckless as he judged. I just saw Wu Mian and didn't want to say more. Section Chief Duan sighed and immediately began to introduce him to the emergency department. Unlike the large-scale tertiary hospitals, the emergency department of the Beijing's a hospital of traditional Chinese medicine is not fully equipped. Not only is there no micro pump, but even the staff is incomplete. For example, there are no surgeons in the emergency department, only physicians. If you encounter a trauma patient, call the surgeon on duty for treatment. Primary hospitals are simple because they are rudimentary, and everyone knows it, including the patients. Soon, Dr. Sun walked in with the newly printed electrocardiogram. Wu Mian didn't answer the call, and asked, Dr. Wei, in what year did you graduate from the medical school? Hearing Wu Mian's question, Section Chief Duan's heart suddenly picked up. This is the rhythm of fighting, simple and straightforward, without the slightest concealment. Although I didn't greet other parents directly, from a doctor's point of view, questioning the graduate school is equivalent to pointing to the nose and saying that I didn't study well and didn't do business properly. Bethune graduated. Wei Dabao said. Wu Mian used his nose to make a sound. Although he was behind the sunglasses, Wei Dabao still had an illusion. His eyes were sharp as a knife, and he poked his heart straight. He quickly explained, 20 years ago, correspondence class, undergraduate. After explained, Wei Dabao felt weird. Why does this weird young man in front of him always feel like he can't hold his head up? It's like being scolded by the master for being lazy. Correspondence is also recognized by the state. Wei Dabao then tried to refute. Well, it's pretty good to have a correspondence education. Wu Mian said, can you read the ECG? Hearing Wu Mian's words, Section Chief Duan and Wei Dabao were both stunned. In this tone of speech, it is clear that the head of the department is talking to his doctor. He, just arrived, how dare to talk like that? The point is that this guy didn't even look at the electrocardiogram. He was pretending to be cool just wearing sunglasses, dare to say that? U wave increased by more than 1 mm and merged with T wave to form a double peak T wave. What does it mean? Wu Mian is like a teacher, his tone is not very harsh, but in the ears of Section Chief Duan and Wei Dabao, it is so harsh. We are doctors, not ordinary people. What kind of ghost press has been liberated for many years? How can you still believe this kind of superstition? Just forget it. The key is that you are a doctor, and you don't perform scientific treatment, but exorcise the patient. This is nothing wrong. If you are delayed here, regardless of whether the family will pursue it or not, will you feel guilty when you think about it the day when you are old? If you have nothing to do, learn more. If you don't learn and have no skills, there is no future. Wu Mian, who was just as taciturn like an iceberg, repeatedly scolded. Xiao Wu, would you like to take a look at the ECG? Section Chief Duan said aside. I saw it when Dr. Wei came in. The initial consideration was the abnormal electrocardiogram caused by hypokalemia. The cause of hypokalemia is highly suspected to be a complication of hyperthyroidism. The so-called ghost press is weakness of the limbs caused by hypokalemic periodic paralysis of hyperthyroidism. UU reading www.uukonshu.com. As for the differential diagnosis such as acute polyradiculitis, polymyositis, and secondary hypokalemic paralysis caused by other reasons, I won't say more about these. Section Chief Duan was very upset. The kind of arbitrary, bossy, and domineering juvenile and aspiring young people shown in Wu Mian's body were simply not too strong. But he used his profession to talk about things, not his father or his mother. No one could say anything. I'll go back if I'm fine. Wu Mian helped her sunglasses and said, I just came back, the jet lag hasn't reversed, it's a little tired. After finishing speaking, he walked straight out of the duty room. Wu, how should the patient be treated? Wei Dabao asked. There is a micro pump. When hypokalemia occurs, 10% potassium chloride is dissolved in physiological saline and pumped intravenously at a rate of 10 mol/hour. Pay attention to closely monitor blood potassium, otherwise hyperkalemia will also cause death. Our hospital does not have a micro pump. Just add 1.5 grams potassium chloride to 500 ml sugar or saline intravenously. The speed can't reach 10 mol/hour, but 80 drops/minute will do. Young people, don't be afraid. Be careful not because of pain or pain. The restlessness causes the needle to roll. After speaking, when people walked out of the room, Section Chief Duan felt vaguely as if he had hallucinations, and Wu Mian's face seemed a little pale when he finally left. It wasn't until a few minutes after Wu Mian left that Wei Dabao asked, Duan K, who was that just now? Section Chief Duan gave Wei Dabao a sideways look, and was furious at the thought of how he was doing folklore in white clothes just now. The son of the mayor of Wu. Which township chief Wu? Which one else can it be? That. Well, that. Hey. Wei Dabao was taken aback, and then asked in confusion, is it him? You know Wu Mian at your age? Old man, who doesn't know about Beijingzi? Wu Mian, my son is more familiar than me, I probably hate him in my heart. At this point, Wei Dabao showed a strange expression on his face. Section Chief Duan didn't ask, he was like a mirror in his heart. When every child is young, there is always a hurdle that cannot be circumvented. Children of other people's families. In Beijing's township, this other person's child is the old Wu's kid Wu Mian. Even if nearly 20 years have passed, the legend of that year has not been weathered, and it has become more and more legendary. Section Chief Duan always talked about Wu Mian when he was young, and educates his own children. Look at the children of other people. Why do the boys from the old Wu family keep skipping grades and go to provincial capitals to study provincial key points when they are less than 10 years old? What can't you do? Look at the children of the other family. Why is the kid from the old Wu family always number 1 in the provincial key? After taking the college entrance examination for 2 years, he went to the imperial capital as the provincial science champion. As for Wu Mian after that, Section Chief Duan is not very clear. Why did this kid come back? I heard my mother say, didn't the Wu family kid go to the United States? He wants to settle in the United States. Wei Dabao asked suspiciously. Who knows? Section Chief Duan said indifferently, but thought in his heart, this sentence can really be applied to Wu Mian. Was going around, but didn't he return to Beijingzi afterwards? This child is also miserable. Thinking of this, Section Chief Duan didn't continue the topic and asked, is there really something wrong with the patient's ECG? Wei Dabao looked sad, old man, I will look at an electrocardiogram of myocardial infarction, and everything else is abnormal to me. I can't understand, I can't understand. This is the truth, and Section Chief Duan didn't care. Not to mention the doctors at the Beijing's Township Hospital of Traditional Chinese Medicine to read the electrocardiogram, even the non-circulatory doctors of the top 3 hospitals in the city are probably not good. But Wu Mian didn't even look at it, so he talks so much. Section Chief Duan felt that it was abnormal. He took the ECG from Wei Dabao and took 3 photos. Old man, are you looking for someone to see? Isn't Xiao Wu gone? No one of us asked to understand, we still need to check. While talking, the phone at the nurse station rang. After 10 seconds, the nurse shouted, Wei Dabao, the clinical laboratory reports the critical value. Serum potassium 1.8. Ask if it is a sample error, let us send another tube of blood. The measured value varies according to different machines in the laboratory. The standard value of Beijing's Township Hospital of Traditional Chinese Medicine is 3.54.5 mol/L. The value of 1.8 mol/L is low no matter what the value of the machine is. It is not simply low, but too low. The seriousness of hypokalemia is known even by section chiefs who do not engage in clinical practice, such as respiratory muscle weakness leading to suffocation, for example, cardiac dysfunction, leading to sudden death, and so on. Section Chief Duan can no longer remember what Wu Mian said at the time that the mouth-suffering disease was called, but he still remembers hypokalemia caused by hyperthyroidism. Is really sick, not a ghost press. Section Chief Duan glanced at Wei Dabao and said, what are you still doing? Go and treat the patient. Wei Dabao's eyes were a little out of focus. He was startled, before he said in a daze, why is blood potassium so low? Hurry up to replenish potassium. Section Chief Duan frowned. Then what? Can you cure hyperthyroidism? Then, of course, after remission, let the patient's family take the patient to the city hospital for treatment, I still ask. Section Chief Duan felt that Wei Dabao was completely stupid. The blood potassium is really so low, he thinks it's amazing. The old Chen family's kid is wearing sunglasses, it looks like he's too pretend to be. What can you see through the sunglasses? He was diagnosed? With some doubts, Section Chief Duan stood by silently watching the nurse give the little patient a drip. Jingle bell, the phone rang, and the absent-minded Section Chief Duan was startled. Director Liu. Chief Duan, I read the electrocardiogram you just sent, and there is a problem. Hurry up and send it to the city at 1:20. There was a rough voice on the phone. It was Liu, Deputy Director of the Circulatory Department of the Municipal People's Hospital. Director Liu, what's the problem with the patient? The U wave increases and merges with the T wave to form a double peak T wave. Consider the abnormal ECG caused by hypokalemia. By the way, check it out before you come. Director Liu, the blood potassium has been checked, 1.8 mol/L. Section Chief Duan said with suppressed surprise in his heart. Director Liu on the phone call was even more surprised. He obviously knew the medical level of Beijing's township. When would they be able to read the ECG? We have done the corresponding examination, diagnosis, and treatment. But you know the situation, always look at you and check it out. Hearing that Director Liu of the People's Hospital was a little surprised, Section Chief Duan felt a little refreshed, but he said politely, thinking that it is caused by hyperthyroidism, how about going to your side, can you help me take a look? Ro. A very affirmative answer came from the phone, and Section Chief Duan smiled. Most of the patients usually go to the hospitals in the city for treatment. If they meet someone they know or are severely ill, they come forward to find someone. Although they will pick it up, they have to run a few words on their own. This is part of the medical contempt chain. Who makes the Chinese medicine hospital at the bottom end of the contempt chain? But this time he promised so happy, he should be curious about the diagnosis of hypokalemia caused by hyperthyroidism. Wu Mian, it seems interesting. Section Chief Duan hung up the phone, thinking about various things in his mind. After nearly 2 hours, the patient's weakness in limbs eased, and he was alive and kicking like a normal person. Another long time wasted. In the end, the section chief left the number of Director Liu of the People's Hospital to the patient's family, and this was the end. Tossing all morning, my stomach gurgled. Section Chief Duan went to the medical department to take a look and saw that Wu Mian hadn't come at all, and stayed home from get off work until noon for dinner. Feeling restless all the way, this old Wu family kid seems a bit interesting. The people are good and the technical level is quite good, but they are too good to be installed, and they have to wear sunglasses in the house. Does he think it is the era of Brother Xiao Ma? Aren't you afraid of hitting the wall? Ordinarily, his age is not the time when Hong Kong movies are popular. Could it be a problem brought back from abroad? When I got home, the smell of the food came on me. Dad, you are back. The son greeted with a meal in his mouth. Why do you eat so early? Section Chief Duan asked while changing his shoes. Go to the city right away. Duan Fei, the son of Section Chief Duan, said, Dad, why do you seem to have something in your heart? Well, about the patient. What am I talking about? The hospital is a human job. You asked me to go to the hospital, and the idiot went there. I'm worried every day. It's not that, but the old Wu family's son is back. Section Chief Duan said absently. Who? Duan Fei's eyes widened, and he turned to ask. Wu Mian, your classmate. Section Chief Duan sat down at the table and said, come back and become the deputy chief of the medical department. After a few seconds of silence, Duan Fei laughed loudly, it's that kid. How do you speak? Section Chief Duan said with a glaring look at Duan Fei. When I was young, I saw his pulling look unpleasant. Every day I listened to my mother talking about the children of the old Wu family. It was disgusting. Duan Fei said gleefully, I have the ability to stay in the United States. Why do you come back? Is it so good to earn 3,000 to 4,000 yuan a month in your medical department? Section Chief Duan sighed and shook his head. In this way, he is a nerd. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com can only study. This life is very long. Duanfei shook his head and said, shaking his head. Where are you going? Opening an adult goods store, I feel embarrassed when I go out. Your old thoughts are outdated. Duanfei said triumphantly, now the rich are. Section Chief Duan looked at Duanfei viciously. Duanfei swallowed the rest of the words back in time, and said with a grin, that's what happened today, or maybe go see Wu Mian. That kid used to be very bullish and didn't want to take care of us. Sleeping in get out of class, and being in a daze after class. But every time he scores 100 points in the exam, it's really maddening. After experiencing the severe beating of the society this time, I really want to see if his poker face has any expression. Poker face? Section Chief Duan thought of Wu Mian's face wearing sunglasses, and it seemed a bit more appropriate. What are you going to do? The president of the China region of Scholl Company came to our city to inspect. Of course, as a dealer in our city, I will join in. Duanfei said. Don't talk, you are also a dealer. I didn't let it, saying it was in a hurry. It was my friend in the company who told me. I'll try my luck and see if I can get the provincial generation. The provincial generation will not work, but the city generation will do. Dad, if Scholl's city generation can be taken down, I can buy you a house in the city after the new year. Just don't nibble the old, find someone and let me hold my grandson. Section Chief Duan babbled. I don't want to be old, I just don't want to buy a house in Beijingzi. We are here in the urban-rural fringe. Whose girl is willing to marry us here, I will go to the city to buy a house. Duanfei said positively. Snoring after eating, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. I'm leaving, I have to go to the airport. Go early and drive slowly. Duanfei was in high spirits, whistling and getting into the car to light up. What Wu Mian looks like in his memory is very vague. If he hadn't been said so many times when he was a child, I am afraid that he would not even remember the name. After all, Wu Mian didn't want to play with other children when he was a child, and soon went to the city to study middle and high school. Since then, there has been no news. Such a person is no longer like a living person, but just an abstract symbol. Duanfei was in a good mood, and more wanted to straighten up in front of the elders. How are the children of other people's families who have had their ears out of cocoons since they were young? It's not that I went back to work from 9 to 5 in the fringe of urban and rural areas, earning dead wages, and relying on Lao Tzu to find a job. Duanfei was especially happy when he thought of her old lady being speechless. After getting on the airport expressway, he tried to put this happy and joyful thing aside, and repeated the exercises after picking up the boss of this Choli China region. What opportunity do you need to brush your face? It would be great if he was willing to get in his car, but Duanfei knew that this was all a dream. Scholi, a century-old multinational group, will be short of pickup cars? Joke. We must seize this opportunity, but I don't know how to fly. Take your luck, the chances of doing it are not high, Duanfei knows this in his heart. An hour later, Duanfei stopped the car in the parking lot, called his classmates, and entered the airport. A team of business people in suits and leather shoes at the airport, perhaps such a dress, such a group of people are not eye-catching in the imperial capital or the magic capital, but it is quite eye-catching in a place like LZ City. How come there are so many people, and they are still very eye-catching? Duanfei didn't dare to go up directly, and quietly hid behind to observe the situation. Hadron, what's the matter? He sent a WeChat message, and then shook the classmates who had no sense of existence at the end of the crowd with WeChat voice vibration. The boss of the provincial capital came to pick you up. Qiangzi replied briefly. I didn't notice this point before Duanfei, and it was really weird to think of it at this time. The regional manager, or the manager of the Chinese region, came to LZ City instead of the provincial capital, but went to Linzhou. It is unreasonable how to think this unscientific. The distance between LZ City and the provincial capital is very close. Beijing's township is between the two. From the straight line distance, the distance from Beijing's to the provincial capital is a little closer than the LZ city center. But Duanfei didn't say a word, didn't dare to ask, just stood quietly behind and waited. Soon, the plane arrived on time, and a few men and women who looked like business elites came out first. The person who picked up the plane suddenly became shorter, and even Duanfei felt that the smile on his face was too flattering and sweet. Really licking a dog, Duanfei thought in his heart. I can only open a small shop, is it because I don't have enough licks? The district manager is a middle-aged man in his 40s. He has an indifferent expression. He just symbolically greeted the pickup person and walked straight to the exit. Duanfei leaned over carefully, his ears turned into rabbits, wanting to hear what they said. Have you contacted President Tsai? I made 2 calls and was hung up without speaking. The manager of the provincial capital said with a wry smile, I'm afraid of being annoying, so I didn't dare to continue contacting. The middle-aged man's face was covered with dark clouds, and the assistant beside him took out his cell phone, glanced at him with an inquiring look, and then dialed. Duanfei was surprised. He originally thought that the district manager was here to inspect the work, but he didn't expect it to be looking for someone. Who in Linzhou needs to visit? Could it be that they came to meet the leaders of the city to talk about investment? Nor should it be. If a multinational group such as Cholet came to investigate and invest, there would definitely be a business reception, and the rank must be a deputy city cadre. But now it seems that there are only people from the Scholl group in the provincial capital, and no city leaders appear. Weird. Duanfei's ears almost turned into antennae, for fear of missing even a sentence or a word. It would be great if they came to find their own father, and the province will be at your fingertips. Duanfei couldn't help thinking so even if he knew it was impossible. There is no provincial representative in Stray, and they are all directly established branches of the company. Municipal agency is also not possible. As for the township, it is still possible. He understood the way, pretending to be a pedestrian, deliberately walked in front, trying to listen. Don't find me if it's okay, don't find me if it's okay. There was a very rude voice on the phone, cold, without a trace of emotion. I'm going. The voice is very young, not very young. Will there be any old man living in seclusion in LZ city? Duanfei thought. Even the secretary around him is so cold, probably not low level. Although it has passed the era of attracting investment, if the Scholl group invests, how can it be counted in tens of millions of dollars? So much money, how much economy can it boost, and how much GDP can be increased? But the phone side turned out to be as impatient as throwing a fly away. The key is that the manager of the Scholl Group Greater China region has a smile on his face, as if he is cautiously accompanied by the leader's report. I go. Duanfei never dreamed that his small city would actually hide a dragon and a tiger. Didn't you hear that you were unwell and returned to your hometown? Mr. Smith told me to come and see what you have here. The manager didn't finish saying a word, and the phone was hung up indifferently. Smiled bitterly, but the pace was firm. The group was not angry because of the opponent's refusal. They could not even see the discouragement and walked directly out of the hall. Watching the convoy slowly leave, Duanfei ran into his car, chasing the exhaust of the convoy all the way. Are there any great people in LZ city? Duanfei pondered while driving. But looking through the hero spectrum, it seems to be nothing. Near the provincial capital, Linzhou is very vampire, the economy has always been poor, and the area is small. I haven't heard of anyone living in Linzhou in seclusion. But I think about it, how can a character who can make a high level of a multinational consortium look humble and smile no by himself? Duanfei quickly figured out this truth, and he sighed. It's a pity, it's not my father on the phone. Less than 20 minutes later, Duanfei was dumbfounded. The UU reading www.uuganshu.com convoy went down from an intersection of the airport expressway and did not go straight to the city, but drove to a familiar place, Beijing's township. This road is Duanfilet, how could he not know it? Going the wrong way, it must be because they are not familiar with the place where they were born, and they have gone the wrong way, Duanfei thought in his heart. If there are reclusive old cotters, it is possible in the urban area, but it is absolutely impossible in Beijing's township. After staying at home for so many years, I have never heard of any golden phoenix flying out of this broken ground. Followed behind the convoy suspiciously. Duanfei Wukai became more guilty. It would be great if he went to his father. What if my father had any exchanges with the manager's parents many years ago, or if my myocardial infarction had an acute attack many years ago, my father saved his life. Although the cold and rude voice kept circling in his ears, telling him that it was impossible, Duanfei was still unwilling to destroy this dream directly. In anticipation, the convoy did not go the wrong way, went straight into Beijing's township, and came to a half-new residential building. Everyone on the road looked at a black limousine that was incompatible with Beijing's township with surprised eyes. The sharp Mercedes-Benz logo and the thick black color can feel expensive even if you haven't seen it before. Even the Eden keys that are running on the rampage hide far away, for fear of getting into trouble. Who lives here? Duanfei tiptoedly followed behind, wondering in his heart. The middle-aged man headed by had a whispered conversation with the assistant beside him, then came to the door of the unit and rang the doorbell. "Auntie, I am Teacher Wu's friend, come to visit Teacher Wu," he said gently. "Professor Wu? I made a big groove, is it Wu Mian?" A weird thought flashed in Duanfei's mind. Wu Mian's friend. A woman's kind voice came from the doorbell. Duanfei was stupid when he heard the words Wu Mian reach his ears. Wu Mian? Wasn't he unable to hang around outside, and came back to his hometown in a desperate manner? What's happening here? Did Wu Mian just come back for vacation? People are messing around outside, even the big leaders of multinational groups have to rush to flatter? He was thinking about it, the unit door opened, and seeing a crowd of people going upstairs, Duanfei hesitated for 0.2 seconds, and followed behind him. This building was built earlier and belongs to the first batch of real buildings in Beijing's township. At that time, it seemed high-end and high-end, but now I feel that the corridors are cramped. Especially after standing more than a dozen urban professional white-collar workers in suits and shoes, Duanfei felt out of breath. "Auntie, hello." Stule's general manager stood in front of the door, bowed slightly, and greeted him in Cantonese Mandarin. The accent is a bit strange, but it is still understandable. "It's Wu Mian's friend, come in and sit in, come in and sit." A woman who seemed to be only 40 years old said a bit astonished, looking at the people all over the hall. "Excuse me," the general manager said, "I know that Mr. Wu is back to China, I will bring." Just halfway through the conversation, a cold voice came from the back room, "Wu Mian is not at home." Duanfei was stunned when he heard this voice, arrogant, rude, and indifferent. These labels were no different from the Wu Mian he knew. For so many years, Wu Mian has not changed, but has become even more rude. Wu Mian's mother was a little embarrassed, she said embarrassedly, "My Wu Mian is just like this, his temper is not very good, don't care." "Auntie, Teacher Wu rarely sees outsiders," I interrupted him. The general manager said quickly. After he finished speaking, his voice raised slightly, and he was polite with respect, "Mr. Wu, I will bring you your usual surgical supplies." Surgical supplies? Duanfei's mind completely turned into a paste. Isn't Sturi an adult product? What the is surgery? Could it be said that the second element has begun to play operating room costs? This is too expensive. Still rich people can play, Tusk. No, how could the general manager of a multinational group in Greater China come to Beijing's township to deliver surgical supplies? It's incredible how you think about it. Is it fake? Are liars so professional now? With 100,000 whys in his heart, Duanfei looked stupidly at the general manager and bowed deeply, then refused Wu Mian's mother's retention, leaving only a delicate suitcase and a gilded business card, and then left. A crowd of people went downstairs, and Fei turned sideways to give way in the squat corridor. When the general manager walked by, he vaguely felt a strong sense of oppression oncoming. "Xiao Fei, when did you come?" Wu Mian's mother greeted Duan Fei when she saw Duan Fei. "I heard that Wu Mian is back, come and see him." Duan Fei stammered. Hearing what he said, the general manager glanced at him deeply, then turned and left. "Xiao Fei, Wu Mian is resting. When he comes back, can you get together?" "Okay, okay." Duan Fei just made an excuse, and left as if after talking about it. Closed the door, Zhang Lan sighed, took a look at the box on the ground, walked to the door of Wu Mian's bedroom, patted the door, and said, "Xiao Mian, the visitor is here, so you won't come out to take a look." "Mom, I'm chatting with Kiko. Let's talk, I'll make sweet potatoes for you in the evening," Zhang Lan said. Wu Mian was lying on the bed with his eyes closed, and the bright and enthusiastic sunlight was blocked by the blackout curtains. He was lying on the bed, but he was still wearing sunglasses and black lambskin gloves on his hands. "Brother, who's here?" the girl across the phone asked. "Stule's boss, should have brought me gloves." Wu Mian said lightly, "You come back quickly." "Yeah, miss me if I haven't seen you for a day," the girl said with a smile. "It is said that the country hospital is idle, nonsense." Wu Mian said, "I saw a patient with hypokalemia causing paralysis of limbs." "Did you take off your glasses?" "No, you can tell at a glance. Besides, it doesn't work without taking off your glasses." "I glanced at the electrocardiogram. I still feel uncomfortable when I come back." "I know, I will stay for one night, chat with my mother, and go tomorrow." Chu's Hixie said, "Don't take off your glasses yourself. I tell you, if you go to live in the ICU, it's not right. There seems to be no ICU on the Beijing's side. It's insomnia, headaches, how come ICU is involved?" Wu Mian said, "Okay, you hurry back. I know, what to eat tonight. My mother said that to make sweet potato paste, it is candied sweet potatoes. I liked to eat them when I was a child, but at that time I was poor and couldn't afford sweet potatoes. I only used potatoes. I only eat candied sweet potatoes during the Chinese New Year." The two chatted for more than 20 minutes before Wu Mian hung up the phone. He was turned into a genius since he was a child, and he is a standard child of another family. But the distress in it, only he knows it. He has a super memory, the bits and pieces of daily life. Many useless memories are like files stored in the computer, as long as his thoughts flash, they will appear in his mind. Generally speaking, this should be regarded as supermemory syndrome, or supermemory syndrome for short. However, too much memory is a natural gift for others, but it is an extremely painful thing for Wu Mian. With the increase of age, instead of getting milder, the condition has become more and more serious. He not only remembers everything he has experienced, but his brain is like installing software, unconsciously analyzing more information on its own. And it's not only hypermemory, but Wu Mian highly suspects that he still has scholar syndrome. However, there is no standard laboratory test for diagnosis of hypermemia and scholar syndrome, and Wu Mian is just guessing. His whole person, especially his hands, had a keen sense of touch to the point that Wu Mian could not bear it. For example, when shaking hands, ordinary people can judge the emotions and other information of the other party through strength, movement, and temperature. But apart from these, Wu Mian could even feel the subtle information of the other party's fingerprints. Anatomically understanding, fingerprints, palm prints, and plantar prints are the protrusions of the dermal tissue between the epidermis layer and the dermis to the epidermis, which are called dermis RT, dermal. There are no two leaves that are the same. Even twins have different fingerprints. The opening of such a keen awareness made Wu Mian fall into the abyss completely. There is an influx of geometric orders of information more than ordinary hypermemia patients, which makes him feel bad. With just one thought and one touch, unlimited information flooded into his mind, making Wu Mian a headache. It's okay during the day. When it's dead at night, even if it's a dream, Wu Mian will consume countless information. He was enveloped by insomnia, and it became a luxury to get a good night's sleep. So after Wu Mian returned from the United States, he refused the invitation of the major tertiary hospitals in China that knew the news, and went straight back to his hometown. It is good to think of a quiet hometown, to receive less information, and to suffer less crime. For Wu Mian, whatever prospects are bright. But when I met a ghost press patient early in the morning, Wu Mian's heart was clouded with a haze. The Healer Has No Sleep has begun, and I will report a few things to the book friends and adults. From the title to the story, I like it all. The context of the story should be clearer with the experience and lessons of the live broadcast room. It is still in the mode of sitcoms, medical literature, mainly about various cases and operations, the bitterness of doctors, patients, and family members. Go to buy Pfizer? Although it is with medical texts, it is more similar to urban rebirth texts, which I would not write. Trivial things, this is life. The hero of this book has no system, no plugin, only illness. Has a glamorous appearance, but in fact he has endured more pressure and severe beatings from life and society. Doctors have no sleep. It means literally. The doctors on duty even include second-line doctors. At least half of the time on duty is sleepless all night. I wrote 996 in the previous book. Looking back at the medical industry, it was silently 996 long ago, even more cruel than 996. My department is not very busy now. Most of them are slow-diagnosed patients and work more than 70 hours a week. In the medical industry, this is quite easy. There are many doctors who work for more than 90 hours or even 100 hours. What to do after night shifts for surgery or going out to outpatient clinics is normal. What? Do you still want to rest after night shift? Did you sleep well yesterday on duty and still dreaming now? The other meaning of is the name of the protagonist, Wu Mian, the uncrowned king. It also implies that he is sick. The content of the story will definitely continue the writing method in the later stage of the live broadcast room. In fact, some of the later content has been quite mature, and I was very satisfied when I wrote it. For example, the medical trouble that bleeds from the 7 orifices and crawls out of the operating room. When I wrote it, my back became cold. Ghosts are not scary, some people are not human, but real dogs are more scary than ghosts. 6.29 million words in the live broadcast room. Now the number of words is a bit too long, and it cannot keep up with the 24 hours later. I took a look when I was resting, and thought it was caused by the length. In fact, a long story of 3 million words is the most suitable. Everyone is still looking at it. Then we continue to the next one. Therefore, the number of words in this book should be around 4 million. At that time, look at the mood and writing status, and the content of the story. The second book is now, and I have to face a brand new challenge. Everyone, don't worry about whether the story is repeated. The text in the melodrama mode consists of various cases. There are hundreds of emails in the mailbox, each of which is a veteran experience in the medical industry. What I want to do is to make them more interesting and make everyone happy to watch. If I can step on some pits as little as possible, it is the best. You can't eat the fungus that has been soaked for a long time, and you can't take amoxicillin in boiling water. This is a big hole in life. Another example is the ghost press at the beginning. Science, science, still have to believe in science. Internet articles are getting harder and harder to write. I won't go into details here. Urban writing is especially hard to write, only slightly better than ghosts and horrors. Don't complain, try to write better, so that you can have a good reading experience. Update: 3 changes every day in the public period, or 3 o'clock in the morning, old taste. I hope that every day when adults wake up, eat breakfast, or go to work and catch the subway, there is a good way to kill time, and start a new day with sleepless doctors. Plus more, 2 for the leader, 20 for the silver, and 200 for the gold league, calculated based on fan value. Subscribe to every 500 plus more chapters after it's on the shelf. After is on the shelves, the minimum guarantee is 5 shifts every day. When asking for a monthly pass, it will be increased to 68 shifts, and occasionally 10 shifts. It should not be more than 10, because I feel that there are too many updates. For example, in October last year, the time period for renewal and exchange of monthly tickets, the 24HOUR subscription has declined slightly. Too much or too little is not enough, 10,000 20,000 is just right. Writing online articles is a long distance running. I think about the content every day. It is also difficult for the adults to keep the love as always. Reading www.yuyugonshu.com. It's really difficult to see each other. I try my best to have new content every day, interesting and lively content. As for the children of other people's families today, I think it's pretty good. This is the first time for me that a veteran is carrying a new gun. I have written a lot of articles in the past, except for the live broadcast room. There is no frustration after every time I pounce on the street, and I will come back after a short break. But come again. I forgot my account and register again. I used my old account to open a new book. This is the first time. After a busy day yesterday, I didn't understand a lot of things. For example, the status is not changed on the first day. Other authors and adults upload the contract status on the first day. That is a lot of work in advance, and I don't understand at all. Because I still haven't signed a contract, I can't even create a character tag. I only found out after asking about it yesterday. Wait, no hurry, no hurry. Just report this, and ask the book friends to don't forget to vote for recommendations every day. Newcomers and new books, please support me. 1102-560-1212, the new fan group number, everyone can chat. I basically don't bubble, because 2 jobs, family, and all kinds of trivial matters, middle-aged men do have limited energy. With a middle-aged body, there is no way to compete with young people. This is a natural law. If you want to update more, the only way is to spend time. But I can peek at the screen, bow 90 degrees in the live broadcast room, and the psychological shadow area is 3 rooms and 1 hall. Just report so much. I hope everyone can watch it happily. Life is not easy, we work hard to live happily. Seeking recommendation votes, seeking comparisons. Hey, Bixen should be fine next week, sirs, don't forget. Bow, 90 degrees. Old Wu, I'm back. Where is my son? In the house, wash your hands, prepare to eat. Zhonglan wiped her hands on her apron and asked, I have a bottle of mutai left, take it out. Are you sure, our father has a good drink? Wu Zongta said loudly. He is about 1.8 meters tall, has a sturdy body and a dark complexion, which looks like an iron tower. Although not shouting in a loud voice, his voice was loud and loud. It's just that there is a faint discomfort in the voice, and the 2 thick black eyebrows are tightly locked together. Dad, you are back. Wu Mian walked out of the room and said. You kid, why do you still have this stinking problem? What kind of sunglasses you wear at home? You are not a good person at first sight. I don't know who I went out to learn from, it's not the same. Wu Zongta scolded. If you have bad eyes, you don't know. Besides, even if I am not a good person, you were born to me. Wu Mian was not at all confused. I haven't told my parents about my physical condition, for fear that they are worried. Chu's Hixie is the only one who really knows his situation. A family of 3 did not get together for some days, a table of food, Mao Tai, which has been hidden for 10 years, a long-lost family happiness. Neither Wu Zongta nor Zhonglan asked why Wu Mian returned to his hometown. No matter whether he had a good life, whether he had any prospects, it was his own child. They didn't know that Wu Mian had come back to hide quietly, they just arranged for him to take a leisurely job in the medical department. Not to mention foreign academic qualifications, but as far as the domestic Zihe doctorate is, it is in Beijing's a township. A deputy chief of the medical department with no level can only go through the normal procedures. You can leave the future alone, but there is something more important than the future passing on from generation to generation. The topic of urging marriage has never changed. For Zhonglan, who has retired, Wu Zongta, who is about to be second tier, is especially important. The family of three clinked glasses and ate some food. Wu Zongta couldn't wait to bring the topic to this. Wu Mian, when are you and Zioxi going to get married? Wu Zongta asked. Although he is 55, Wu Zongta served as a soldier when he was young. He is still physically strong and speaks full of breath. Xiao Xi said she was a junior, but she was actually my apprentice. I taught her surgery, not a girlfriend. Wu Mianpan smacked the old lady's craftsmanship, still the taste in memory. He also wore black lambskin gloves and looked a little weird with his chopsticks. Wu Mian has been looking at his father from the corner of his eye. The old man is the kind of person who rarely takes work things home. He is busy outside, tired, grievances are wronged, and be beaten by society is beaten by society, but he always smiles when he comes home. But it's weird today, frowning all the time, as if something is going on. Fun boy! Wu Zongta scolded, you are hanging up with other girls, so maybe you just don't admit it because you are eating and eating. Look at what you said, you don't acknowledge what you have eaten, do you say that your own son? Wu Mian said flatly, just because she has a good talent, I will just give pointers for a while. How many years have it been? I'll count it. Zhonglan said, 6 or 8 years. You met when you were in the imperial capital, and you took other girls to go abroad. You said you were taking an apprentice? You really bullied your parents. The world? How come I am also an old head nurse, what old director hasn't seen before, who brings an apprentice like you do? With apprentices, they all grow freely, can see clearly and are diligent in their hands and feet, so they will have an operation. If you don't understand, that's the case, and it's not your own. Mom, why do you and my dad tell me that I am like a scumbag? Could it be that I gave it to me when we installed a landline when I was a kid? Scumbag, this word is very vivid. Zhonglan smiled. What do you think? Wu Zongta frowned and asked. Wu Mian regretted returning. Beijing's is not the paradise in my imagination at all. Although there are few people, things are not rare at all. When I just came home, looking at the old man's posture, if I can't answer this question today, I have to sweep myself out. It's so distressed, even the mellow fragrance of Mao Tai can't save Wu Mian. But he is not a young man who has just come out of school and has not experienced the world. Wu Mian raised his cup, and saw that his father was motionless, so he touched the cup with his lower hand and drank the wine happily. Be serious. Dad, don't talk about me first, look at you. Wu Mian began to surround Wei and save Zhao, frowning, what happened to the precise poverty alleviation in the countryside? Which lazy man would rather eat relief food than get rid of poverty and get rich? Speaking of this, Wu Zongta's expression on his face became more sad. He stared at Wu Mian, his expression turned dark for a moment, then he sighed and shook his head slightly. That is the college student village official who is not used to the life in natural villages, and he is asking you to complain? Are you clamoring and wanting to come back? Wu Zongta sighed again, picked up the wine glass in front of him, and took a sip for himself. Tell me, don't be bored. At your age, nothing is prominent, except for the lumbar disc, nothing is high, except blood pressure, blood sugar and blood lipids. Wu Mian said. How do you talk to your dad? Zhonglan reprimanded softly, and then said, "Don't talk about work, food, food. You have to talk, don't take your work home, and you will be overwhelmed by yourself." How could Wu Mian give up such a gauge of an opportunity? "Dad, when you are old, you will be second line." What an irritation! You read the book www.yuyuganshu.com to talk about it, as a decompression. How come your son? I am also a psychologist, let's just talk about it. Last year, at the World Psychiatrist Annual Conference, I was an expert in the town. Don't be nonsense, you're all messed up. Wu Zongta said for a while, immediately paused, and said, "Do you remember Uncle Wang?" "Remember, Wang's Hejian, there were very few college students back then, now I am 56 years old. When I was young, I held me and wanted to be in-laws with our family. Well, he has already embraced his grandson. That's a joke. When did Xiao Linza get married, why didn't he tell me? Speaking of business, what happened to Uncle Wang? Your Uncle Wang usually knows what you have done. I don't know which evil you committed today. When the team meeting was held, I started to curse when I opened the table. That's ugly." Wu Zongta's brows were frowning tighter, and his face was ugly. Like thinking of the old partner cursing at the team meeting. "Hey!" Wu Mian took a mouthful of food and put it in his mouth, but did not take out the chopsticks, held it in his mouth, and began to ponder the words of his father. For ordinary people, it is normal for grassroots leaders to slap their mothers on the table, especially in rural areas. If the work is not rough, you can't push it at all. Gentle? That doesn't exist. But Wu Mian knows that Wang's Hejian is elegant and easygoing, but this kind of elegance that is incompatible with Beijing's township did not delay him from doing business. It is hard to imagine that Wang's Hejian would slap on the table and scold others, and even scold his old man depressed. Pharaoh? Does he still curse? Zhonglan smiled. I don't know what's wrong. Today's meeting was originally about precision poverty alleviation. The work was almost done. I thought that 10 minutes was over, and the old boy cursed at the door for an hour. Wu Zongta said. No. Wu Mian interrupted Wu Zongta. I also know that something is wrong. It may be that the few nail households left in the last targeted poverty alleviation were scratching their heads and tossing. Wu Zongta sighed. It has nothing to do with precision poverty alleviation. Where did Uncle Wang eat at noon? Wu Mian put his chopsticks on the bowl. The board was upright. But his body became straight, like a sharp sword out of its sheath. How? Uncle Wang is the kind of person with strong self-control. According to your dad, there is no special pressure recently. Besides, so many things didn't crush Wang uncle back then. Now he is about to retire. What can I do? He doesn't have any mental illnesses. He has a sudden change in temperament. Considering that he has an acute illness, it may be very serious. Don't talk nonsense. Wu Zongta was really upset this time. It's not nonsense. Wu Mian was very serious and stood up. Dad, let's go to Uncle Wang's house. Zhonglan was taken aback for a moment. Let's finish the meal first. Mom, it doesn't matter if the meal is cold. If you go late, maybe Uncle Wang will be cold. Wu Mian said. Wu Zongta and Zhonglan looked at each other. Although they did not agree that their son said that Pharaoh was ill, the word cold is quite sharp and true in a certain context. Go and have a look. If you come back and eat again, don't delay anything. What if something happens? In case, and come are here are the two comforting words of the Chinese people, it is all-purpose. Wu Zongta is also simply, and it won't take much time to take a look. Put on your shoes and went out with Wu Mian. Wu's and Wang's are not far away, less than 10 minutes walk. Along the way, Wu Mian asked Wang's Hejian about the recent situation and got a preliminary understanding. Wang's Hejian hasn't changed anything in the past few days, except for a rage at the afternoon team meeting. Wu Zongta did not think it was a work matter. Of course, he also denied the possibility that the working group would come down to investigate Wang's Hejian based on his character. Besides, I didn't hear the wind. If something happened, I would definitely not be able to hide it from him. Hypoglycemia, pulmonary encephalopathy, hepatic encephalopathy, drug poisoning, acute stroke, carotid artery dissection, carbon monoxide poisoning, lupus encephalopathy. The names of this series of diseases echoed in Wu Mian's mind. Each is one of the differential diagnosis, and each one may be a fatal disease. It is not difficult for Wu Mian to think of every differential diagnosis and find the real reason from it. What is difficult is that every time he thinks of a disease, countless information floods into his mind. How many pages in the first edition of Internal Medicine, the nuances of the text in each edition, the patients with similar illnesses encountered, the relevant medical records in overseas and domestic literature, although he has already forged his nerves to be as hard as steel, but there is no way to put an end to the impact of information from the root. Thinking about this, his temples began to burst. Many illnesses may cause sudden emotional changes, and Wu Mian could not make the final judgment without seeing Wang's Hejian. He just asked various details to make a differential diagnosis, and at the same time wondered about the higher possibility of the disease. There is a sudden change in temperament. There are superstitions in Beijing's township, but Wu Mian naturally doesn't believe it. For him, these can be explained clearly by science. Soon, the father and son came downstairs to Wang's house, and a familiar figure was ringing the doorbell. Wu Mian's gaze penetrated through the sunglasses, and when he saw the back, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. Is Wei Dabao, the master who met in the Chinese medicine hospital early in the morning? Wei Dabao, what are you doing here? Wu Mian asked from a distance. Wei Dabao was taken aback. He felt his voice cold and familiar. Looking back, it turned out to be Wu Mian, with a complicated expression on his face. Some joy, some embarrassment, some confusion. Who? A woman's voice came from the doorbell. Wei Dabao didn't speak. He turned around and ran to Wu Mian's side, his waist bends unconsciously. Chief Wu, why are you here? Wei Dabao's face was full of smiles, like a blooming chrysanthemum. Let me see Uncle Wang. Uncle Wang? Secretary Wang. Wei Dabao was taken aback, muttered, and then woke up and cursed himself bitterly. Wu Mian, a child of the head of Wu's family, knows this by myself. Why didn't I think of it? Wu Zongta glanced at Wei Dabao and said coldly, Are you Dr. Wei from the Township Hospital of Traditional Chinese Medicine? I am. Wei Dabao felt a force of pressure on his chest, just like the essence. The roughness was like a violent wind blowing the dust in the sky, and the cheek was a little painful. Dad, how did you know? I heard people say, a disciple of Laotian Taoist temple, feudal superstition. Wu Zongta said coldly without giving Wei Dabao any face. But he didn't have Wei Dabao in his eyes, and he didn't necessarily want to communicate when he knew it. Strode to the door and rang the doorbell again. Who's bear boy, is it fun to ring the doorbell? The woman's voice came out, quite impatient. Ranzi, I am your Uncle Wu. Wu Zongta said. Uncle Wu, why are you here? The woman greeted her, and then opened the unit door. Wu Zongta took the lead and strode upstairs. Like the Wu family, the corridors here are narrow and cramped. Wu Zongta walks in front, his broad shoulders seem to occupy all the space, even the lights are dimmed a bit. Uncle Wu, you are here. A young woman in her 20s, holding her child in her arms, greeted her at the door. Well, come and see your dad. Wu Zongta walked in. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Wu Mian smiled and greeted the young woman. When she saw the young woman, Wang ran, It's been a long time since I saw you, you're a mother now. Wu Mian. When Wu Zongta entered the house, the young woman saw Wu Mian wearing sunglasses and a khaki trench coat behind her. For an instant, the dim lights in the corridor brightened up, and the whole world was fragrant. I came back yesterday, come visit Uncle Wang today. It's been a long time since I saw you, how are you? Get out! Get out of here! A voice came from the back room, followed by a bunch of dirty language with mosaics and garbled codes. Wang Ran was a little embarrassed. She lowered her head embarrassedly, hugged the child in her arms, and said bitterly, I'm sorry, my dad has a bad temper these days. I thought I was thinking about my grandson and holding the child. Return. What are you screaming at? Wu Zongta slammed back, come out and talk about what's going on. Take my breath away, believe it or not, put your head in the toilet as a toilet seat. The friendship between the two old people for decades is not in the group meeting, so naturally they don't need to be subtle in their words. Dad, keep your voice down, you're still quarreling at how old you are. Wu Mian said, I'll go see Uncle Wang. Generally speaking, nonsense, weird behavior, and behaviors that are different from before are mostly caused by hepatic encephalopathy. This is a high probability judgment, and part of it is a precursor to Alzheimer's. An old Dexun professor in Imperial Capital was suddenly turned to the Public Security Bureau one day, saying that he was molesting the bus. The diagnosis is Alzheimer's. Wu Mian has all seen these, but the voice of Wang Zhejian's voice is a little strange, which is different from the previous judgment, so you have to see it with your own eyes. Uncle Wang, I came to see you. Wu Mian changed his shoes and went straight into the back room. As he walked, he said enthusiastically. The cold and repelling voice from thousands of miles away disappeared. Wei Dabao was stunned, feeling that this young man wearing sunglasses, wearing a khaki windbreaker, and wearing a pair of black lambskin gloves really did change face. Turning your face is as fast as turning a book. This is the skill. Is it a family handicraft? Wei Dabao peeked at the head of Wu. Rolling a series of curses came out, pretending to be a big-tailed wolf, do you think you will be great when you come back from abroad? Wearing sunglasses, do you want to pretend to be blind and beg for food? How about your erhu, why don't you hold it? Then came a series of curses that were garbled. Wu Mian was not unhappy. He stood in front of the old man he was familiar with. He hadn't seen him for a long time. The gentleman and rooted college student in Beijing's township was already old. Grey hair, his face is full of traces left by years. His life's energy and enthusiasm are scattered on the land of Beijingzi, leaving only his old body. It is true that was scolded. The brain automatically recorded Wang Zhejian's swear words, but Wu Mian took the initiative to ignore them. The patient is clear and clear, this is the most important thing. Many differential diagnoses can be ruled out. And Wang Zhejian was holding a cup of tea in his hand, and took a sip when he was tired of scolding. Is not hepatic encephalopathy, at least he still remembers going abroad, nor is it Alzheimer's, it is another manifestation. Wu Mian's brain was running at a high speed, and his temple banged, and the piercing pain made his body stagnate a little. Uncle, when I come to see you, you just open your mouth and curse, it's not good. Wu Mian hesitated, but still didn't take off his sunglasses. Wang Ran wanted to come in and persuade his old man, no matter how much he was a guest, it would be no good to curse like this. The moment I entered, I saw Wu Mian's profile, and time seemed to have stopped, his hands numb, and the child almost didn't fall to the ground. Hugged the child in a panic, concealing his embarrassment and shyness. Wu Mian did not pay attention to Wang Ran. He looked at Wang Zhejian, his eyes narrowed behind the sunglasses. Uncle Wang, the two of us have not seen each other for more than 6 years. Wu Mian took a step forward, took off his right glove, and took Wang Zhejian's hand. The skin is a bit cold, sweaty, and slimy. Get out! Wang Zhejian shook off Wu Mian's hand and cursed, don't be okay, just follow me. The eye circles are dark, the lips are slightly bruised, and the skin is damp. Wu Mian has basically figured out the situation in his heart. It's called 120. Wu Mian said firmly. Wu Mian, I'm sorry, my dad wasn't like this before. What? 120. Wang Ran panicked and said, and finally noticed what Wu Mian said. 120? What is it called 120? Hurry up and go to the city. Wu Mian said. Thoughts flashed. Wu Mian had already thought of first aid, surgery, intraoperative complications, and postoperative recovery. Tried to suppress countless distracting thoughts, Wu Mian turned around and saw Wang Ran holding the child in a daze. No one around him did what he said, and this situation made him feel quite unfamiliar. Didn't say much, Wu Mian took out his mobile phone, took off a glove, and made a call. That hand is really good looking, with smart fingers, making a phone call is like playing a piano. Wang Ran forgot to find 120 first aid for abdomen, his eyes were attracted by the hand under the lambskin glove. Wu Mian, what's wrong with your Uncle Wang? Wu Zongta walked in and asked. If myocardial infarction is suspected, I must be hospitalized immediately. After the diagnosis is confirmed, I guess I will need surgery. Wu Miandao. Wu Zongta hesitated for less than a second, but chose to trust his children. Let me come, our place is different from the city. Wu Zongta said. Are you trying to kill me? Wang Zhejian roared, his hands began to tremble with anger, the water in the cup swayed, and a few ripples appeared. Old Wu, you are a dog, do you want to be a secretary? Just your age, can you be a secretary for you? With your quality, can you lead the whole town to a well-off society? Wang Zhejian began to yell at him, but Wu Zongta is usually upright and there is nothing shameful. But even so, the Wang family who listened to them were all embarrassed, and Wei Dabao stood in a corner, pretending that he didn't exist. This is a scolding battle between two big guys in the village. If I hear something I shouldn't listen to, will it be okay? In an instant, Wei Dabao's inner drama began to increase again. Go ahead. Wang Zhejian scolded, you two are not at ease. I don't think I can get angry enough at the team meeting, so I have to come to my house to irritate me. The more he talked, the more angry he threw the enamel jar in his hand at Wu Mian. Braved the steaming water and raised it out, Wei Dabao was stunned. This is going to do all martial arts. It's over, I have witnessed the discord in the leadership of the Beijing's township, and how will I get mixed up in the future? But I didn't finish my thoughts, I only saw Wu Mian's shoulders shrugging lightly, and the white jade-like hand raised just to catch the cup handle. The enamel tank drew an arc in midair and danced along the water droplets in midair. There was no dripping water that had been scattered all over the sky, and they all returned to the tank. Is like a sprinkling motion backwards, Wei Dabao was about to applaud in his heart, this hand is quite beautiful. At this time, Wu Mian had put the enamel jar aside and said, Dad, let's go. Go. Don't make Uncle Wang angry. Wu Mian turned her head and nodded at Wu Zongta. Don't be like this person, get out of my house quickly, you are not welcome here. Wang Zhejian stood up and yelled unabashedly. Wu Mian didn't explain, but grabbed Wu Zongta's hand and turned around and left. And Wang Zhejian's lover greeted enthusiastically, as if nothing had happened, the father and son changed their shoes and went out. Wu Mian, what's the matter? Went out, Wu Zongta couldn't wait to ask. Uncle Wang is sick, does our township hospital have 120 ambulances? There is one, I just bought it last year. Wu Zongta still doesn't understand why Wu Mian insists that Wang Zhejian is sick. Judging by the appearance of the old partner, he was full of confidence when he was swearing, not as if he was sick. If you are sick, mental illness is still possible. Was scolded for a day, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com even came home to look for curses when he went home at night. Wu Zongta's expression became even more gloomy, as if he was enveloped by a rain cloud. Wu Mian's hand pressed heavily on his temple a few times, and then picked up the phone. Director Gao, it's me. Wu Mian dialed the phone while going downstairs. There was a man's voice on the phone, with a hint of surprise. Xiaomian, why are you, what are you looking for? My name is Teacher Wu, what Mian Xiao? Are you at home? Yes, here. Are you going back to your hometown and passing through the provincial capital? The man said busily, don't refuse today, I will wash the dust for you. I arrived home early. There is an acquaintance in Beijing's a township who suspects that the blood supply to the brain is insufficient due to acute myocardial infarction. If I am correct in my judgment, I may need interventional surgery soon. Hey! The person was disappointed. It's convenient for you. I will call you to my dad. If there is a problem, he will take it to the freshman year. Convenient, convenient, you are kind. I will go to the emergency room immediately after answering the phone. It's convenient, then I'll hang up. Wu Mian simply finished speaking and hung up the phone directly. Although he was polite, Wu Zongta frowned at the cold energy. Who? In the first year of medical school, the director of the first circulatory department, interventional surgery is okay. Wu Miandao. Why is it so unkind to talk to the director? Wu Zongta scolded. Wu Mian didn't explain, put on sunglasses, and said, I guess my uncle Wang is about to fall ill. Let's find a 120 ambulance and wait. The doctor in the emergency department of the Chinese medicine hospital can't do it. It will take at least 2 hours to get traffic jam from here to the first year of the medical school. Got enough medicine? Wait, you speak slowly.